And then we have a viewer mailbag question. So we had someone write in saying, I'm seeing lots of articles about a researcher who has discovered that USB devices like mice, keyboards, and thumb drives being extremely hackable. What can I do to protect myself? My initial reaction was, don't plug in USB devices to your computer that you don't know, right? Only use your own stuff that you trust, especially with USB thumb drives. But I think you had a different spin on this as well, Matt, so a little bit more detailed thought on that.
So this is actually research that's going to be coming out at Black Hat soon. They're calling it bad USB. The real crux of the issue is that every USB thumb drive and practically every USB device contains a small microcontroller or microchip. Mm-hmm. It's a processor. It runs arbitrary code just like any other processor does. And what you can do is if you can reprogram these processors, they can behave in strange and unexpected ways. For example, turning a USB stick into it's called a human interface device, or HID. This is a trick that's been around for a little while. I know Hack5's USB Rubber Ducky does the same thing, and I know Iron Geek was doing this a while back. But basically, you plug in the thumb drive, your computer will recognize it as a keyboard, and it'll start immediately typing as if it were a keyboard. So it will, fire up its own command shell, start adding itself as a user, blah, 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 blah. Basically as if someone who is incredibly fast was at the keyboard. I mean, you can do the same sorts of things as long as you understand the USB protocol. You can do some very interesting things. Here in particular, we're talking about infecting machines. This is the bad USB attack. You can, you plug into a thumb drive, and based on certain conditions of the machine, maybe it will push a payload or it'll exploit something. But you can do other things as well. I mean, it's basically like having a completely different computer plugged into your computer with free reign. Other really cool research in this area was done by, I believe it was Travis Goodspeed with his face dancer device. He actually came up with a USB device that you can plug it in and use it like a regular USB device. But if anyone tries to use forensic software, which treats the drive sectors a completely different way, it will return a completely different set of data. So you've got a USB device that defends itself against, forensic
activity,
yeah. And I think Bunny Wang had the same kind of idea with SD cards, which as well have a small microcontroller inside of them. Most flash memory, I could think practically all flash memory has a small microcontroller to control it's called wear leveling, just the way that the memory is designed to sort of allow you to have an interface that treats it like a regular hard drive instead of as a bunch of different cells of memory. There's a lot of information, and I think it's going to be a really exciting field to see where this goes next.
Right.
I probably oversimplify things.
Okay.
STDs come to mind here. And I probably shouldn't go into too many details of that analogy, but think about it for a couple of minutes, and I think it'll again.
Yep.
Well, it also goes back to our story that we covered either last week or the week before, where, having physical access to a device basically is game over. Mm-hmm. So if someone can, coerce you or without your knowledge insert a USB device into your machine, it's game over. They have the potential to, do whatever they want to the machine.
I had actually pulled up those immutable laws of security, the 10 immutable laws of security on, I'm looking at it here. And you're exactly right, John. The law that applies here is actually the third law. If a bad guy has unrestricted physical access to your computer, it's not your computer anymore. And I think the subtlety, now this was written back in 2008. And I think actually the original version of this was perhaps written back in 2000. I'm not exactly sure about that. But ultimately what it comes down to is perhaps there's a little subtle modification that's needed here, because I'm not sure they really anticipated the distinction between physical access, or I think the intent was to really have USB devices not be able to take full control of computers, but there are clearly some flaws here, and perhaps there's some hope for improvement in the future.
Well, and the other thing is, we've seen in the past devices that got infected before they got shipped to the consumer. Mm-hmm. And, if somebody wants to maliciously program the firmware of any USB device before it reaches the consumer, plugging in a brand new one that you just opened the package on doesn't necessarily mean you're safe.
Right. Yeah, compromising the supply chain is always the big, if you can get into the supply chain, then you really could trick people even like us, you go to the store and buy a mouse or a keyboard or even a thumb drive, you're pretty much thinking, okay, well, I'm relatively sure that between the time this came from the manufacturer to the time that I'm opening the package here, that no one's tampered with it. But if they could, affect that, or if they're extremely motivated here, they could potentially, compromise it and put something on there, and you think it's perfectly clean. Even the most ardent security person might not be able to pick up on that very easily.
Unless you can't audit that firmperware. That's the thing. You can't use antivirus and scan it either. It's completely, it's at a level that you're not even operating at.
So hopefully, I don't perceive that this is a very prevalent problem yet. So I'm going to hope that it's not going to become one, because that would be something to be really worried about. But it is something to be aware of. Certainly USB devices have been talked about. I know we've talked about it as a vector for infection just in general for at least the past 6 years, and trying to figure out how to control people's ability to still use thumb drives in their company laptop and not get compromised, or whether we should even allow that at all. I'm sure a lot of organizations struggle with that kind of issue. So one of those things to be wary of.
Yeah, and perhaps there's a opportunity to take some cues from the medical industry. I know they've at least tried to pay attention to some of the improprieties that can exist in supply chain. There's certainly a lot of money in the medical industry associated with things. If you can come out with something that appears to be something that it isn't, they still have problems from time to time. But that's perhaps they've learned some lessons that the supply chain and the computer industry can pick up on as these problems become more prevalent.
Right. All right, good one. Thanks for sending that in, whoever did send it. I'm not quite sure, but please send us in more feedback. We always like to hear from the viewers and answer their questions during the show.